Your creative block isn't writer's block. It's awareness poisoning. You sit down to create and immediately every piece of art you've ever consumed floods your consciousness. Every album, every film, every Instagram post that did it better. What if the problem isn't lack of inspiration? What if it's too much information? Welcome back to Metamodern Philosophy School. Today we're talking about creating when you're too educated to believe in originality, and why just start is advice from people who haven't read enough to know everything's been done. Let's name what's actually happening when you can't create. You open the blank page, the empty canvas, the fresh project file, and within seconds your mind starts running comparisons. This idea? Someone did it on TikTok last week. That angle? Wes Anderson already perfected it. This sentence structure? You're just copying that author you love. You're not blocked because you lack talent. You're blocked because you can see the entire genealogy of every creative choice before you make it. You know what's been done. You know what works. You know the algorithms. You know the market. So everyone says just create from the heart, be authentic, find your unique voice, as if you have a voice that exists outside of every influence that shaped you. As if originality were something you could manifest through positive thinking. Here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Nothing is original. Every idea is a remix. Every genius is standing on the shoulders of people who came before. And you know this. You've read enough, consumed enough, studied enough to see the matrix. But here's where it gets interesting, and where metamodernism saves your creative life. What if you're supposed to create in dialogue with what came before? What if originality isn't about making something from nothing, but about making your specific remix? Because the alternative, waiting until you have a purely original idea, means never creating anything, ever. And you've tried that. Tried waiting for the lightning bolt of pure inspiration. How's that working? The paralysis you feel isn't laziness. It's intelligence without a framework. You need permission to be derivative, permission to remix, permission to create in conversation with tradition instead of pretending it doesn't exist. That permission? That's what we're here to give you. Quick word about Metamodern Philosophy School and why we exist. We're teaching philosophy through YouTube videos, which is like teaching swimming through podcasts. Theoretically questionable. But here's the thing. People are genuinely paralyzed by awareness, too educated to be naive creators, too alive to give up on making things. We teach the third way, create from the oscillation. Make work that's in dialogue with tradition, while still having something to say. You're not going to find your voice like it's a lost key. You're going to build it, through making, through failing, through remixing what you love into something that sounds like you. That's the philosophy school. Art school for people who've read too much postmodern theory. So here we are, let's talk about why you can't create. First, let's name the types of creative paralysis that happen when you're operating at this level of cultural literacy. There are three main flavors and you're probably cycling through all of them. Type 1. Genealogical paralysis. This is when you can trace the lineage of every creative choice back to its influences. You think of a melody, you hear where it came from. An image, you know which photographer did it first. A narrative structure, you've seen it in 20 films. Genealogical paralysis happens to people who've consumed too much good art, which sounds like a humble brag. Oh, I'm too cultured to create. But it's real. The more you know, the harder it is to feel like you're contributing something new. And it's not just about having influences. Everyone has influences. It's about being so aware of your influences that you can't make anything without immediately categorizing it as derivative. You start a sentence and hear the author you're channeling. You frame a shot and see the director you're copying. You can't turn off the genealogical awareness. Here's the reframe that might save your creative life. You're not supposed to create something no one's ever seen. That's literally impossible. Every color exists, every chord progression exists, every plot structure exists. What doesn't exist yet? Your specific combination of influences filtered through your specific experience. You're not trying to invent blue, you're trying to mix the particular shade of blue that only you would mix. That's the originality that's actually available, not novelty. Specificity. Think about your favorite artists, the ones you return to. Are they original because they invented something completely new, or because they combined existing elements in a way that feels distinctly theirs? Radiohead didn't invent electronic music or rock music, they combined them with their specific emotional palette. Tarantino didn't invent any of his techniques, he remixed B-movies and French New Wave and 70s exploitation into something unmistakably Tarantino. Your originality is in your specific remix, your particular constellation of influences, your emotional frequency. That's not less valuable than pure novelty. It's more honest about how creativity actually works. Type 2. Algorithmic anxiety. This is the knowledge that whatever you make will be competing with infinite content in an attention economy designed to favor viral hooks over depth. You know that your careful, considered work will be scroll past fodder unless it has a thumbnail that screams. And you've internalized this. Before you even create, you're thinking, will this get engagement? Will this algorithm favor it? Will anyone even see it? Is there any point in making something thoughtful when rage bait and hot takes get all the oxygen? So you either don't make anything, or you make something optimized for metrics that makes you feel dead inside. The advice here is usually create for yourself, not for likes. Sure, great, except you're not a monk on a mountain. You're a person who needs to eat and who wants their work to reach people. The pure art versus commercial art binary is exhausting and not actually how anyone operates. Metamodern approach. You can care about craft and care about reach. You can make something meaningful and think about how to get it seen. That's not selling out. That's being strategic about getting your work into the world. Both and, remember? You hold both the integrity of the work and the pragmatics of distribution. The trick is sequence. Make the thing you need to make first. Create from what wants to come through you. Then think about packaging, how to present it, where to share it, what thumbnail might help it find its audience, not the other way around. When you start with what will perform, you're dead before you begin. You're making content, not art. When you start with what wants to come through me, then figure out how to present it strategically. That's sustainable creation. And here's the thing about algorithmic anxiety. It's partly real and partly projection. Yes, the algorithm favors certain things, but you don't actually know what will land. Some of the most viral work was made by people who had no idea it would blow up. Some of the most carefully optimized content dies in obscurity. So you might as well make what you're compelled to make and see what happens. Because the alternative, making only what you think will perform, guarantees you'll hate the process and probably still not get the results you want. Make what you need to make. Then be strategic about how you share it. That's the practice. Type 3, performance paralysis. This is when you're so aware that all art is performance, all authenticity is curated, all finding your voice is constructing a voice, that you can't do any of it without feeling like a fraud. You sit down to write something personal and immediately you're aware you're performing vulnerability. You try to paint something raw and you're aware you're performing rawness. You want to make something sincere, and you can't access sincerity because you're too aware that sincerity is always already a performance. Everything feels like cosplay of authenticity, which, let's be honest, is very sophisticated and very annoying. This is the deepest creative paralysis because it questions the very foundation of why you're making anything. If it's all performance, if there's no authentic self to express, why make anything at all? If every creative choice is just you borrowing from what came before and packaging it strategically for an audience, where's the meaning? Where's the you in all of it? Here's what helps. You're not trying to access some pre-social authentic self. That doesn't exist. You're always already performing, always already filtered through language and culture and influences. Every thought you have is shaped by the thoughts you've consumed. Every feeling you feel is mediated by the emotional vocabulary you've acquired. There is no pure unmediated you underneath it all. There's just you constructed, performed, real anyway. See the difference? Authentic implies there's a real you underneath the performance. True implies you mean what you're making even though you know you're making it. You can consciously craft something and still mean every word. You can be aware you're performing and genuinely feel what you're performing. Both and. You hold the awareness and the sincerity in the same breath. This is what metamodernism offers. Informed naivety. You're sophisticated enough to see the constructs, and you choose to participate anyway, not because you forgot their constructs, because you decided meaning is worth making even in full awareness that you're making it. You're not faking sincerity. You're being sincerely aware that sincerity is a construction and choosing to build it anyway. That's not fraud. That's courage. Now let's talk about why conventional creative advice fails people like you. The just start people tell you to stop overthinking and get in flow state. Turn off your inner critic. Don't edit while you create. Access your inner child. Make bad art. As if your awareness were a switch you could flip off. As if sophistication were the problem rather than your actual condition. You can't unlearn what you know. Can't unsee the constructs. Can't unconsume the decades of art you've internalized. And you've tried to create like you did when you were young and naive. Tried to recapture that unself-conscious making. Tried morning pages and artist dates and all the Julia Cameron techniques. It's not coming back. You're not that person anymore. Your brain has changed. Your awareness has expanded. You can't shrink yourself back to innocence. But here's the good news, and this is where metamodernism becomes your creative salvation. Informed making is more interesting than naive making. Work that's in dialogue with tradition has more depth than work that pretends tradition doesn't exist. Aware creation has layers that unconscious creation can't access. You don't need to forget everything you know. You need to create through everything you know. Use the awareness. Make it part of the work. Let your influences show. Reference them openly. Be in conversation with what came before. What if your specific remix of influences is exactly what makes your work yours? What if the constellation of things you've consumed combined with how you see the world is the originality that's available to you? You're not less original because you know your influences. You're more specific, and specificity is what we actually respond to in art, not novelty. Specificity. Let me tell you about someone who figured this out. He was a filmmaker, obsessed with film since he was 12, had watched everything from Tarkovsky to TikTok, from Bergman to Vine compilations, and he was completely paralyzed. Every shot he planned, he could name which director did it first. Every edit, he knew the reference. Every story beat, he'd seen it in 20 films. He was a walking film encyclopedia, and he couldn't make anything because everything felt derivative before he even started. He spent 3 years not making anything because he was waiting for an original idea, which never came, because they don't exist. Not in the way he was imagining originality, not as some bolt of pure genius untouched by influence. Then he watched everything everywhere all at once, and something clicked. Here was a film that wore its influences openly. Wong Kar-wai's romantic color grading, the Wachowskis' multiverse concepts, Michel Gondry's handmade effects aesthetic. Daniels didn't hide the references, they celebrated them. They remixed them into something that felt both familiar and new. You could see the ingredients, and the final dish was still uniquely theirs. And he realized the originality isn't in the ingredients. It's in the specific way you combine them. It's in your emotional palette, your thematic obsessions, your particular way of seeing. So he stopped trying to make something no one had ever seen, started trying to make something that felt true to his specific combination of influences. His first short film was openly derivative. You could spot the references if you knew cinema. There was some Kaufman in the structure, some P.T. Anderson in the pacing, some Lanthimos in the absurdist tone. But it was also undeniably his sense of humor threading through the darkness, his emotional beats that came from his actual life, his specific aesthetic born from his specific obsessions with those particular directors combined with his specific cultural context growing up with the internet. And people responded to it. Not because it was revolutionary, because it was honest about what it was. Empathy said. It didn't pretend to be purely original. It said, here are my influences, here's what I'm doing with them, here's why it matters to me. That honesty was more compelling than any claim to pure originality would have been. He's still making work, still seeing the influences, still catching himself channeling other directors, but now he's in dialogue with them instead of paralyzed by them. Now he says, yes, this is my Tarkovsky moment, and here's what I'm doing with it that Tarkovsky didn't do. Creating in conversation with tradition instead of crushed by it. That's the shift. And the anxiety, still there sometimes. The voice that says this has been done. But now he has a response, yes, and I'm doing it with my specific combination of influences and my specific emotional truth, so it hasn't been done like this by me. That's enough. That's the originality that's available. Now let's talk about your talent. Because creative paralysis and ignored talent are intimately connected in ways that might not be obvious. You have a creative talent, specific, undeniable, the medium where you see things other people don't, where your taste is impeccable even if your execution isn't there yet, where you have strong opinions about what good work looks like, and you're probably not developing it, because acknowledging it would mean you'd have to make bad work before you make good work, and when you can already see what good looks like, making bad work feels unbearable. Your creative paralysis isn't just about seeing too many influences. It's about not wanting to be bad at the thing you know you could be good at. It's about the gap between your taste and your current abilities feeling too humiliating to bridge. Here's what nobody tells you. Your talent has a development curve. You need to make 100 bad things before you make one good thing. That's not inspiration or motivation. That's math. That's how skill development works in any creative domain. But when you can already see what good looks like, when your taste is sophisticated from years of consuming excellent work, making bad work feels like public humiliation, like evidence you're a fraud. But here's the thing, your taste being better than your execution isn't a problem. It's the gap you're trying to close. It's proof you're on the right path. If you had no gap, if you thought everything you made was amazing, you'd have no taste. You'd be making mediocre work with no capacity to improve it because you couldn't see the distance between where you are and where you want to be. The gap is information. It tells you you're in the right zone. The pain of the gap is what every creator experiences. The only difference is whether you use it as evidence to stop making or as fuel to keep closing the distance. Ira Glass said this perfectly. Nobody tells this to people who are beginners, and I really wish someone had told this to me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there is this gap. For the first couple years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good, it has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. Your disappointment in your work is your taste functioning correctly. It's not evidence you should stop. It's evidence you should continue until your skills catch up to your taste. So this week, make something bad. Intentionally. Make the worst version you can make of something in your talent zone. Not to be ironic or clever. To remove the pressure. To prove to yourself that making bad work doesn't kill you. That the world doesn't end when you create something that doesn't match your taste. Your talent needs reps, needs failures, needs you to show up even when the output is embarrassing. Every great creator you admire made mountains of garbage before making anything good. But they started. They made the bad work. They closed the gap through volume, not through waiting for genius to strike. Your talent is waiting on the other side of 100 failures. So fail this week. Make something terrible in your medium. See what happens. Notice that you survive it. Notice that the act of making, even badly, feels better than the paralysis of not making at all. And here's what might surprise you. Sometimes your bad work has more life in it than your good work. Because when you're not trying to be perfect, you take risks. You play. You discover things you wouldn't discover if you were being careful. Some of the best creative breakthroughs come from making something badly and accidentally stumbling into something interesting. So give yourself permission. Permission to be derivative. Permission to be bad. Permission to make 100 terrible things on the way to one good thing. That permission is the antidote to paralysis. Now let's talk about what you can actually do with this information. Practices. Real things you can try this week. Practice 1. Influence mapping. This week, make a list of your top 10 creative influences. The artists, creators, writers, filmmakers, musicians, whose work you return to, who shaped your taste, who made you want to make things. Write them all down. Then look for patterns. What do they have in common? What aesthetic threads connect them? What themes show up across multiple influences? What techniques or approaches do you consistently respond to? That pattern, that constellation of overlapping influences, that's your voice trying to emerge. You're not copying any single influence. You're synthesizing multiple influences into something that doesn't exist yet. Your specific combination. Write down what that combination might look like. Not what you'll make, what aesthetic space you're trying to occupy, what your particular remix of influences might sound like, or look like, or feel like. This isn't about being original in the sense of unprecedented. It's about being specific, about identifying your particular constellation of influences and obsessions, because that constellation is unique to you. No one else has consumed exactly what you've consumed in exactly the order you consumed it, with exactly your emotional responses to it all. That's the originality that's available, the specificity of your influences combined with the specificity of your experience. Practice 2. Create in dialogue. This week, make something that's explicitly in response to something else. A painting in response to a song you love. A poem in response to a film that moved you. A video essay in response to another video essay. A photograph in response to a photograph you saw. A piece of music in response to a piece of music. Give yourself permission to be derivative, to reference openly, to be in conversation with what came before. The paralysis comes from trying to make something from nothing, from trying to have a purely original idea, untouched by influence. But you don't have to. You get to make something from everything you've consumed. That's not cheating. That's how creativity works. All creativity is in dialogue with what came before. Make your remix. Let the influences show. Credit them if you want. Say this is my version of X, or this is inspired by Y, or this is in conversation with Z. You might find that working in dialogue is less paralyzing than working in isolation, because you're not trying to conjure something from the void. You're in conversation with something that already exists, and conversation is easier than monologue. And here's what often happens. You start in conversation with one influence, and discover you're actually synthesizing multiple influences. You start making your version of someone's work, and it becomes less their version and more yours as you go. The dialogue becomes the bridge from paralysis to your own voice, not because you find your voice separate from influences, because you find your voice through remixing influences. Practice 3. Volume over perfection. This week, make 7 small things. 7. 1 per day. No exceptions, no excuses. Doesn't matter what. Doesn't matter if they're good. Just make volume. Make quantity. Make consistently. Could be 7 bad poems, 7 terrible sketches, 7 30-second video experiments, 7 photographs of the same thing from different angles, 7 terrible first paragraphs, 7 melody ideas you record on your phone. The point isn't quality, it's reps. Getting your hands moving, getting the creative motor running, proving to yourself that making doesn't require perfect conditions or perfect inspiration or perfect readiness. You'll be shocked how much creative paralysis dissolves when you commit to volume over quality. Because perfectionism is just fear dressed up as standards, fear of being bad, fear of being derivative, fear of not mattering. Volume is how you outrun the fear. You make so much that individual pieces stop mattering as much. You're not pinning all your hopes on one perfect piece. You're building a body of work where some pieces will be better than others, and that's fine. And here's the magic of volume. You can't maintain paralysis across 7 things. You'll be too tired to overthink by day 4. By day 6, you'll be making things just to get it done. And somewhere in that relaxation of standards, something interesting will emerge. Not because you tried to make something good, because you gave yourself permission to make something at all. Think about what you're not making right now. What's the project you keep putting off? The idea you keep refining in your head but never executing? The thing you've been planning for months or years? What's stopping you? Be specific. Not "I don't have time" specific. Actually specific. What's the fear? What's the story you're telling yourself about why you can't start? Usually it's one of three things: fear it won't be good enough, fear it's already been done, fear it won't matter. Let's address each one. It won't be good enough? Correct. Your first version of anything won't be good. Make it anyway. It's already been done. Also correct. Everything's been done. Make your version anyway. It won't matter? Maybe. Probably not to most people. Make it anyway for the handful of people it might reach, including yourself. All three fears are valid. All three are also reasons to make the thing, not avoid it. Because the alternative is making nothing. And nothing definitely doesn't matter. At least making something has a chance of mattering to someone, even if that someone is just you. This week, notice how much energy you spend refining the idea versus executing the idea. Notice if you're using research and planning as sophisticated procrastination. Notice if you're polishing the concept to avoid the messiness of making. Notice if you're waiting for permission that's never coming, for perfect conditions that don't exist, for certainty you're not going to get until you start. Then make one small thing, anything. 5 minutes of making. See what shifts. See if making anything breaks the seal of paralysis. See if motion creates more motion. Think about your relationship to being bad at things. Can you remember the last time you were a beginner at something? When you sucked and that was fine because you were learning? When you gave yourself permission to be terrible as part of the process? Or have you spent years only doing things you're already good at? Only operating in zones where you can maintain competence? Your creative paralysis might be perfectionism in disguise. You're not willing to be bad. Not willing to make the 100 terrible things required to get to the good things. Not willing to be a beginner again. And that's understandable. Being bad at something when you know what good looks like is genuinely painful. But it's also the only path through. This week, practice being a beginner again. At anything. Not even your main creative thing if that feels too loaded. Try a new medium where you have no expectations. Where you can be terrible without it meaning anything about your core creative identity. Paint if you're a writer. Write if you're a visual artist. Make music if you're a filmmaker. Be bad at something on purpose. And notice what resistance comes up. Notice the voice that says, I don't have time for this. Or this is pointless. Or I should focus on my real work. That voice is the same voice keeping you from creating in your actual medium. The resistance to being a beginner anywhere is the resistance to being a beginner in your creative work. Practice overriding it somewhere low stakes. See if it gets easier to override it in your actual work. Because that resistance, that's the gap between your taste and your current execution. Learning to sit in that gap without fleeing is the skill, not just in creative work, in growth of any kind. Practice the discomfort of the gap somewhere safe. Then bring that practice to what matters. If this resonated, if you felt seen in your creative paralysis and understood why just start feels impossible, hit subscribe. We're building meta-modern philosophy school for people who can't unsee the constructs but still want to make things. People who are too educated for naive creating but too alive to stop making. People who see all the influences and still have something to say. People like you. Every episode is another way to navigate the tension between awareness and action. Another framework for creating through sophistication instead of despite it. And there's so much more to explore together. More on relationships, on purpose, on navigating existence when you think too much and feel too much. So yeah, subscribe, join the philosophy school. It's free, and it might just get you making again after months or years of paralysis. Your creative block isn't lack of ideas, it's awareness of all the ideas that came before. Create in dialogue with them. Make your specific remix. Let your influences show. That's not derivative, that's honest. Until next time at Meta Modern Philosophy School. Next episode, why your relationships feel performative and what authentic connection actually looks like when you're too aware to be naive. Remember, your remix is original enough. The specificity of your influences combined with the specificity of your experience is the originality that's available. Stop waiting for pure genius. Start making your version.